Welcome back to the news today. This is the Daily Debate. The Islamic State terror group is already a full-fledged part of the fight in Syria. And as Syria's civil war spills over into Lebanon, so do fears of IS. Just this week, a senior official in Lebanese security told reporters that IS militants are holed up on the Lebanese border, aiming to gain control of nearby villages. So is Lebanon the next front for IS? With me is terror expert Dr. Anat Hochberg. Hochberg Marom. Good evening. Thank you very much for coming. And Eran Zinger, Middle East editor for Israel Public.
Hi, good evening.
Radio. Good evening. Thank you very much for coming. Before we will continue this discussion and we will understand, is it or is it not? Nurit, it's yours.
Good evening, Lucy, and to our guests in the studio. So not only has this Lebanese official you mentioned said they're planning to take over villages in Lebanon, but also that recently some 700 fighters pledged allegiance to the Islamic State. So I'll bring you our viewers' perspective on this question that you spoke about. Is Lebanon the next front for the Islamic State group? Looking at our poll, it looks like the majority do believe that Lebanon is next. 79% said yes, 15% said no. And I'll bring you a little sampling of the angles we had from our viewers in response. Jacob said, of course, their clear goal is an Islamic caliphate everywhere, and Lebanon is the natural next step along with Syria. Will wrote to us saying that until this group is truly taken out at its root, it will spread everywhere, and to try to weed it out from the terrain of Syria, Iraq, and Lebanon, no chance. I think a reasonable comment there, that it actually has to be targeted at its root, and by the point that ISIS gets all over the place, it's going to be much harder for a U.S.-led coalition to actually get rid of the group for good. S. Wiesel wrote to us saying, not so trivial with Lebanon under Hezbollah and Iranian occupation. So a sort of semi-optimistic approach saying that the presence of Hezbollah, which is of course a strong enemy of IS, which is backed by Iran, is actually a formidable enemy for the terror group. And let's end with Joseph, who said, don't see how the Lebanese army or even Hezbollah can stop it from happening. So he's kind of responding with a negative approach to that they're not enough to stop it. He goes on to say, especially when ISIS is doing a lot of its fighting online. So there's a point we've been discussing a lot in the news today. Is the group's ideology and social media tactics to spread it really sort of enough to propel it across borders, even when facing Hezbollah and Iran, for example? So for more on that, I'll pass it back to you.
Yes, Nurit, thank you very much. Exactly the last comment that we're talking and we're always saying here, Dr. Hochberg, is that this is the fight. In the social media, it happens there. The battlefield is there, and it seems that no coalition force can stop it.
Period. No words to say, because the war of ideas is there. It is not since the beginning of the year, but if we go back further back a lot to the 2001, when Al Qaeda just burst to the public, to the worldwide public consciousness. We already seen a lot of performance in the internet, specifically in the social media, social networks. They work very hard and very professionally. We don't have any other way to halt the marketing of the terrorists and to abolish the discourse of the global ideology, except for to just to see today their new video with John Cantley just showing it seemed like a trailer for Homeland, or at least, or a new let's say a new series in Fox or ABC or whatever. But let's go back to the reality, and the reality shows that nothing is stopping it. Not the air strikes.
It depends where. It depends where. First, when we talk about Lebanon, ISIS, we should all remember that when we talk about ISIS or ISIL, the Islamic State in Iraq and the Levant, right. Lebanon is part of what we call Asham, the Greater Syria. Right. Lebanon is part of the map that ISIS is now holding, that IS is now holding. Yeah. But you've mentioned something, and it's a very you're correct what you've just said. It's impossible to stop them right now as we see it in northern Syria. But when it comes to Iraq, things are different. And I think that as long as the fighting against ISIS in Iraq continues and we see more and more success of the international community or the international coalition against ISIS in Iraq, we will see ISIS going west. More operations in Syria and in Lebanon. This is one thing.
What is happening exactly in this border that is so problematic in Kalamoon?
It's all about demography. It's all about the citizens over there. Because if we go back 1.5 years ago, almost 2 years ago, when Hezbollah started to stand next to President Assad in Syria, what Hezbollah used to say was that we are protecting the Shiite minorities inside Syria, and we'll keep on being there as long as it is needed. Now it has this is the main change right now. This is where what we used to call the Arab Spring turned into a Shiite Sunni conflict. And as long as this conflict goes on, and as long as we see the Shiite militias in Hezbollah in Syria and in Iraq and other places, you will see IS trying to get into Lebanon.
So if we're looking at trying to, why not, we might see, let's try to draw a picture that Hezbollah will try to fight in the same tools that the IS is fighting, because once upon a time, we remember some videos or some, coming out of Hezbollah that are trying to scare the West. Can it see, because it's becoming like not only, like you said, a war between sectarian, like a sectarian war, it's also a war between terrorist groups.
Sure, it's inside, they're among themselves. Not only between the Shia and the Sunni, but among the terrorist group itself, among the jihadi camp. And we have to take into consideration that the terrorist, the Daesh itself, is embedded into the population. It is very difficult to differentiate among them and between the groups, between the fringe of the fringe extreme groups inside the camp. That's why I totally agree with you that it's going to be a little bit easy, maybe, in Syria as compared to what's going on in Iraq, on one hand. But on the other hand, as far as Hezbollah is going to go into it, it's going to be a lot tougher, because then we can expect and predict a lot more tougher attacks.
Hezbollah is not saying it publicly,
Right.
but Hezbollah or the Hezbollah militias in Syria have had very, very big losses in the last few weeks, especially in the last week. We are now seeing, especially in the Kalamoun area, across the border between Syria and Lebanon. And when you ask Hassan Nasrallah, why do you think you should keep on being there in Syria? Because of you, because of Hezbollah, Lebanon is now threatened by IS. And he keeps on saying, and he went on saying that a year ago. He said, you don't want Syria to become Afghanistan, because once Syria becomes Afghanistan, the same thing will happen in Lebanon.
It's a market share. Sorry to interrupt you. It's a kind of, competition and on top of this market share, because once Lebanon is going to fade or to fall down, to vanish, we may say, the way to Tel Aviv, to Israel is just straight away. It's easy to go.
How much can it play into the hands of Lebanon, maybe cooperating in one way or another, that the Lebanese authorities or the Lebanese government will cooperate more with Hezbollah?
Well, that's a very interesting point now. We have been witnessing, or we have been hearing that the Saudis have been giving $1 billion to the Lebanese army to buy new weapons. The Americans said, we are more than happy to give you whatever you need to confront ISIS. And then the Americans found out that the Lebanese army was about to work with Hezbollah. And then it was when the Americans said to Hezbollah, no way. To the Lebanese army, if you're going to cooperate with Hezbollah, you will not see any response. We will not see any cooperation from our side. And I think that now we are seeing for the first time a stronger, I wouldn't say a very strong Lebanese army, but a stronger and a much more determined Lebanese army, supported not by the Americans mostly, but mostly by the Gulf states, Saudi Arabia, and it's very important for them.
Exactly the point that I wanted to ask you both. Where is the Gulf countries? Where is the Arab states in this equation?
They're behind Saudi Arabia, and we have to notice that the king is going to be replaced nearby. Just to follow the news, he's going to be replaced in one who is a little bit younger than him, around between the 70s and the 80s. What's going on? What will be? Very interesting.
So just a second. Saudi Arabia is supporting the Lebanese army.
This is an understatement, what you've just said.
And the opposition.
Saudi Arabia is the bigger engine.
Right.
it's a hybrid, if you want. It's a hybrid engine, okay, like in a hybrid car. You have the armies in the region, but when it comes to financing these armies, especially when it comes to the greater powers of the Gulf states and Egypt, Saudi Arabia is the main engine to support this whole process against ISIS. Saudi Arabia is now sending billions of dollars.
Not to the tree raid, not to have the deterioration all over the area.
But it won't find like Saudi Arabia in a big problem when they're financing the Lebanese army and Iran is financing Hezbollah, and right now it will be like they're trying to cooperate with each other. It's just doesn't create some kind of a...
This is it.
Let's see
This
what's
is
going on
it.
with Iran and Saudi Arabia. They're
We
afraid
shouldn't
of.
be blind to see what's going on right now after the end. This is
Very
2015. This is the end of the Arab Spring. This is the beginning of a whole new period in which you have what we call the international conflict, the international operation against ISIS. But at the same time, look what's going on with two major superpowers in the region. Saudi Arabia, the Sunni kingdom, which is now doing everything it can in order to block ISIS, but at the same time, to block Iran. The Iranians are sending troops. I've been listening to an Iranian official last week, and he said,
So what, they're blocking Iran like
Lucy,
that?
He said Iran has armies, not one army. Iran has armies today in Lebanon, in Iraq, in Syria,
Yemen.
In Yemen.
Also.
This is the number one threat of Saudi Arabia. ISIS is only a tactical problem. The most strategic, bigger problem is Iran.
Because it's near its borders. And on the other hand, you would say that it's a new era. I would say it's a jihad tsunami.
And if I may add, when it comes to ISIS is something that is happening in your own Sunni house. It's a family problem that you can solve inside your house, inside your family.
Yes,
I like the way that
you're
don't want
putting
children
it.
like ISIS in your family.
Yeah.
But Iran is a total different thing, and we have been witnessing how the Saudis were fighting in two parallel ways. The first one was against ISIS, but at the same time, everything that has to do with fighting against the nuclear program of Iran and Iran's ambitions to conquer the region.
Let's try to connect all these things together.
But let's go underneath. Let's go backward to the marketing era in the internet, in initial social media.
So how
they
does
are
it
the
work?
winners. Period. Let's see what's going on with all the movies. It's going to if I may say so, I mean, I'm very, cautious to predict something, but it's going to be a lot tougher.
In which one?
In the way that what we have seen until today, the crucifying, the beheadings and all the stuff, it's like pre-sale and post-sale movies, it's going to be a lot more...
Brutal?
A lot brutal.
Because
it's an inner competition among themselves.
Because what? They are seeing that they have
share.
nothing to lose because they're seeing that they're starting to lose the game, or they're seeing that they're starting to actually win this entire game that they're playing.
They win them all because the Western doesn't give them any answer. We don't confront them in the internet. This is one of the major issue, our major setbacks.
How can you, just like when we're trying to, each and every time we're trying, how can you start confronting them in the internet?
I have the model that I just invented, a model to counter them, to counter their narratives, to counter the messages.
Like to answer with other videos?
It's not a negotiation. Not at all.
When it all started, about a year ago, well, less than a year ago.
February last year.
Yes, with this whole ISIS issue. I remember the Lebanese foreign minister saying it won't be a problem to attack the ISIS positions.
Right.
You take some airplanes, you attack their positions. This is not the problem.
They're dead.
The problem is to attack their ideology. And this is where the United States and the international coalition have decided that Egypt, and especially Al-Azhar institution, the religious Sunni, or the most important institution of the Sunni world, will be handling the ideology of ISIS to confront them. And unfortunately, up until now, it hasn't succeeded.
How come? How come Al-Azhar, which is the biggest, let's say, institute for Muslims around the world, is not confronting this?
I believe that's because the ones who support ISIS say that Al-Azhar is part of the old order of the world. We have been witnessing the collapse of the Arab state. No more Arab state as we used to know it, and Al-Azhar was part of it.
The old-fashioned political order is changing. We have been witnessing to the changes, and we are still witnessing what's going on until today. They are against the Arab and the Muslim inner religious core. there, the Daesh,
which will lead us where?
To a new era, to the jihadi tsunami, which just takes place right at the moment. We don't know where to and how does it going to end.
It's only the beginning, Lucy. I'm sorry to say that.
You're saying that it's only the beginning, and
that's what I've said from the beginning as well.
It's only the beginning, so
we should meet here again and more and more.
The question is, when will the Arab world, because we're always bringing it here, and we're always saying that the solution should come from the Muslim world and not from the West. The Muslim world should wake up, but it seems that they're too occupied with fighting. Thank you very much, both of you, for coming to the studio. We're going out for a small break, 2 minutes, and then we will come back and we will continue about the failing of the peace negotiations between Israel and the Palestinians during all these years. Don't go anywhere.